This is a two-part series. If you missed the first part, please give it a watch as it relates to this video. When you're executed in Oklahoma, the process begins 35 days before your death. According to inmate Richard Glossip, first they take your belongings, then they transfer you to a block of 4 cells called Death Watch. If you're the only one on the block, they put you in the first cell where you'll stay for a week. Then they'll move you 1 cell over, and so on until you're closest to the execution chamber. There's a camera and a guard for each cell. Bright lights are on day and night, and the only things you're allowed to bring in is a Bible, family photos, and a pen and paper. Some days there's nothing, others you'll watch as other inmates go off to die. Glossip has found himself on death watch 3 times over the last 25 years. He's had 3 last meals, the same 4 items every time: fish and chips, a Wendy's Baconator, a strawberry shake, and pizza. He's listened as 2 men have been put to death, botched lethal injections both, and as soon as early next year, he could be there again, in that endless daylight cell, waiting for his death. Richard is a death row inmate whose possible innocence has long been a subject of debate. The cops and the state say he orchestrated the 1997 murder for hire of his boss, hotel owner Barry Van Treese. Richard says he's never broken the law a day in his life. People Search Service's spokesperson seems to affirm as much, obviously aside from his first-degree murder conviction, which he claims he's innocent. Richard last found himself on death row in 2015 when the state nearly put him to death using potassium acetate, a chemical used to de-ice airplane wings instead of potassium chloride. That blunder, along with a pair of mishandled executions, caused Oklahoma to shut down the death machine to give it a tune-up. Now, unless a group of inmates and their lawyers can convince it otherwise, Oklahoma is primed to hit the gas. Their execution procedure largely unchanged, and Richard, he knows as much, would likely be the first back on death watch. Richard's trouble started on January 7, 1997, when then 18-year-old Justin Sneed beat Barry to death with a baseball bat in room 102 of the best budget inn in Oklahoma City. Van Treese owned the hotel, Richard was the manager, and Justin Sneed was the maintenance man. The story was pretty straightforward, at least according to what the state concluded in Richard's 2014 clemency packet. 2 years after Van Treese hired Richard, who lived in the best budget inn with his girlfriend, he started noticing that the books seemed to be off. He suspected Richard, who was in charge of payroll, of skimming roughly $6,000 and planned to confront and possibly fire him. Justin Sneed, who had become a friend and kind of kid brother to Richard, says the older man woke him up early on January 7th and told him to kill Van Treese, promising him $10,000 for the job, plus a gig managing one of the hotels the boss owned. According to the state, Justin Sneed killed Van Treese, breaking a window in the process, changed out of his bloody clothes, and went to tell Richard the job was done. Richard told him to get the money, which was under the front seat of Van Treese's car, and move the vehicle to the credit union across the road. They split the money, only $4,000 as it turned out, made up a story about 2 drunks fighting in room 102 to keep housekeeping out the way while they fixed the window. They meant to get rid of the body, but the cops got involved when the credit union called the police to report Van Treese's abandoned car. The police homed in on Richard immediately, mostly because his story about when he last saw his boss kept changing. Richard maintained his innocence, however, during 2 police interviews, telling them that Justin Sneed had come to his apartment early that morning and confessed to killing Van Treese, which he thought was a joke. Apparently, Justin Sneed had a weird sense of humor. Meanwhile, Sneed was arrested on January 14th and confessed to the murder, naming Richard Glossip as the mastermind of the crime. Glossip was found guilty of first-degree murder in 1998 and sentenced to death, while Justin Sneed got a life without parole. According to Knight, Richard's lawyer, and Glossip's many supporters, there are some things about the state story that doesn't add up, which gives them pause when it comes to his sentence. Oklahoma State Representative Kevin McDougall said, "I'm a pro-death penalty for people who are guilty, but all I want to do is make sure that in Oklahoma that we have a mechanism to make sure that the people who are put to death are guilty." When Knight first took on Richard's case, he was struck by a few things. 1, that Richard would kill Van Treese for money when he had access as a manager to far more than $4,000 at any given time. And 2, that Richard was put to death solely on the word of Justin Sneed, who was given life in prison instead of death for implicating Richard Glossip. Knight was also shocked by how Richard's first trial went down. For one, his first lawyer, Rain Fernand, had no experience trying capital cases and did little to no investigation into his client's innocence, and even pressed Richard to accept a plea. You don't just show up in a court like in a TV show. You have to prepare for it. You have to hire an investigator, Knight says. Knight has spent the last 7 years doing the work he says Richard's lawyer should have done in the first place. He hired a forensic accountant who says he can prove Richard wasn't stealing money from Ventries. Instead, he says the hotel's income just wasn't matching up to a projected figure. He also spoke with several people who attest to Justin Sneed and only Justin Sneed's guilt. According to one potential witness affidavit, a fellow inmate who knew Sneed when he first got to prison, Sneed's story changed several times at first, which the unnamed man attributed to Sneed coming down off meth. But he never said that Richard was involved, only perhaps a girlfriend. Justin Sneed had a different kind of character, the man wrote in his statement, adding that Justin said Ventries shouldn't have fought back. His thought process was not like yours or mine. He really thought it was okay that the guy had been killing was not a big deal to him. Another affidavit, this one is from a dancer who worked at a club next to the hotel, seems to match the claim that a girlfriend was involved, rather than Richard. A woman who went by the name Fancy and was dating Justin Sneed, as well as Ventries, who gave her money. According to the dancer, Justin Sneed started heavily using drugs, at which point he became scary. He used women from the club to lure men to the hotel so he could rob them, spoke about how he knew where to hide bodies so that they'd never be found, and came back covered in blood once after announcing to friends that he was going to get the money and drugs. The women recalled that after Ventries' murder, Fancy had a customer drive her to a lake where she said she was getting rid of a box for Sneed. After that, Fancy disappeared, telling the other dancer, "I'm not going down for this murder." The most recent news I could find about this case is a handwritten letter that had come to light, casting doubt on the critical testimony of Justin Sneed, who provided the only implicating evidence at the trial of Richard Glossip. In the handwritten letter, Justin writes to his own defense lawyer 3 years later, expressing deep anxiety about the case and his role in it. "There are a lot of things right now that are eating at me," he begins. "Some things I need to clean up." Then he writes, "I think you know it was a mistake reliving this." The letter was uncovered recently by Reed Smith, an international law firm that was asked by Oklahoma state lawmakers to carry out an independent investigation into the Richard case. In its 343-page report released in June, the law firm revealed that prosecutors had intentionally destroyed crucial evidence before trial in a gross violation of due process. The review concluded that no reasonable juror hearing the complete record would have convicted Richard Glossip of first-degree murder. The case of Richard Glossip is still astonishing to me. The fact that a man is being convicted because of a single testimony, whilst having far more witnesses proving his innocence, just shows how this justice system is very skewed. I, like you, don't know the full story of what happened on the night of the murder of Ventries, but if I was on the jury and I saw the full evidence list, I would have said he was innocent. Okay, it's pretty fair to say that if you're Richard and presumably you are innocent, you would voice your innocence and be pretty vocal about it. I think Richard is innocent. I do believe he is being framed, mainly due to two reasons. One, the letter from Justin Sneed where he says some things are haunting him. And second reason is because there are a lot more evidence and witnesses that attest to his innocence. I'm a big believer in innocent until proven guilty. I mean, if that isn't the case, anyone can accuse anyone of murder or rape, but the innocent until proven guilty makes the procedure a lot more just and formal. Richard had been falsely claimed of murder, and I hope he is given another trial. He deserves a fair trial with a just jury and evidence from both sides, the full evidence from both sides. I believe when Richard was switching his story, he might have been nervous. I mean, imagine if it was one of us. We would be nervous and try to come up with anything to say to prove our innocence. But I really hope he is freed, because seeing someone like Richard being put to death row and seeing someone like Pedro Lopez, who confessed to his 300 plus murders, being let go is insanity. The fact that we don't know what the whereabouts of a serial killer but are actively pushing the death sentence on an alleged innocent man makes this the most unjust case I've seen from justice system. I also agree with Richard's attorney. Richard had access to far more than $4,000 as a manager. If money he was after, he could have easily stolen money because he's a manager at one of the hotels. This video was inspired by a comment I've received on one of my videos that stated this case was unjust. After looking into it, I agreed to make a video on the subject. And let me be clear that I am so glad I made this video, because I believe Richard's story is meant to be talked about more and really looked into. Alright guys, that's the end of the video. If you like this two-part series, then please give the channel a subscribe and a comment down below on what I should make next. A like to the video tells me you like this sort of content, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.